Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some brains seem to stay sharp as a tack for decades while others experience a noticeable slowdown? Well, today we're diving into a fascinating study that followed older adults for 3 years to see how their cognitive control abilities evolve. So, how important thinking clearly is for everyday life, right? Well, for older adults, this ability, often called cognitive control, is super important for staying independent and enjoying life. But here is the tricky part. Scientists haven't always agreed on exactly how cognitive control changes as we age. Some studies show declines. Others show surprising resilience, and some even show older adults doing better in certain areas. This might be because many studies look at different age groups at one single point in time, which is like taking a snapshot. But what happens over time, that is where Evolving Minds, a 3-year longitudinal study on cognitive control in older adults, comes in. This study wanted to follow the same group of older adults for 3 years to get a real-time look at how their cognitive control changed. Before we dive into what they did, let's talk about why this kind of study is so crucial. Most research compares different age groups at the same time. This is called a cross-sectional design. The problem is differences you see might not be because people got older, but because they grew up in different times, with different experiences. Think about it. Someone born in the 1940s had a very different life growing up than someone born in the 1970s. These are called cohort effects, longitudinal studies, like this one, follow the same individuals over time, which is a much better way to see genuine changes related to aging. Now, what exactly is cognitive control? It is basically your brain's executive suite. It is what helps you focus, ignore distractions, switch between tasks, and keep your goals in mind. Think of it as the conductor of an orchestra, making sure all the different instruments, your thoughts, actions, and attention play together harmoniously. The study looked at several parts of this executive suite, including inhibition, controlling impulses, updating, keeping track of new information, shifting, switching between tasks, and proactive and reactive control. So, how did they study this? They got a group of 113 older adults, ranging from 60 to 95 years old, and had them come back once a year for 3 years. At each visit, they completed a bunch of different computer-based tests designed to measure those specific cognitive control skills. They used a detailed battery of tests to get a really thorough picture, moving beyond simple pen and paper tests that might not capture the nuances. It's important to note that this study built upon previous work by the same research team where they had initially tested these participants. This allowed them to follow up and see how things changed over a longer period. They did face some challenges, as is common in longitudinal studies. Some participants couldn't be reached or chose not to continue, an issue sometimes called attrition. The researchers found that those who dropped out tended to have slightly lower scores on initial cognitive assessments. This is something to keep in mind, as it means the final group is likely a bit healthier and more cognitively robust than the general older adult population, which could potentially mask some age-related declines. Now, for the exciting part, what did they find? When they looked at responding inhibition, like stopping yourself from doing something you shouldn't, the results were mixed. In one test, the go-no-go task, they didn't see any significant changes in their ability to inhibit responses over time. This suggests that for some types of impulse control, older adults might be quite stable. But in another task, the flanker task, which measures how well you can ignore interference, things were different. Here, they found that the difference in reaction time between easy and hard trials, called the congruency effect, got bigger over time, especially from the first to the second year. Even though people were generally faster on the task over time due to practice, this interference effect still worsened. This indicates a decline in interference control, one form of inhibition, within this group of older adults. What about updating, keeping new information active in your mind in the end-back task, which is a classic for this? They found that participants actually improved over time. They made fewer errors on target trials as the study progressed. This is likely a practice effect. They got better at the task simply by doing it repeatedly. Importantly, this practice effect didn't mask age-related declines for the group as a whole. For shifting abilities, which is about switching between different tasks, the findings were again interesting. While there was a general effect where older age was associated with taking longer to complete tasks, the interaction between age and time on this measure was complex. The increase in time due to age was actually strongest at the second time point. However, looking at the longitudinal changes, the study didn't find a clear decline in shifting ability over the 3 years in the group as a whole. Now for proactive and reactive control. This is about how you prepare for upcoming tasks. Proactive control is like setting up your brain in advance, while reactive control is more about adjusting on the fly. In the XCPT task, participants consistently showed a preference for a proactive control strategy. Importantly, even with age, their preference for this proactive approach remained stable, and they didn't switch to a more reactive style. This supports the idea that older adults might be able to maintain this preparatory control strategy. However, even here, there was some age-related slowing observed in reaction times within this task. So, to summarize the main findings, when looking at changes over time, only interference control seemed to decline across the 3 years, specifically from the first to the second year. The other cognitive control subcomponents showed more stability or even improvements, likely due to practice effects. This is a really key point. The longitudinal age changes were limited, suggesting that either the 3-year period wasn't long enough to see big declines, or that practice and retest effects were stronger influences in that time frame. The researchers noted that practice effects were quite prominent, especially between the first and second time points. This means that just by doing the tasks again, people got better, and this improvement might have masked any subtle declines related to aging during that period. They also speculated about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Since the first data collection happened right after the pandemic, performance might have been negatively affected by pandemic-related stress. Then, as things returned to normal, people may have re-engaged in social activities and recovered, leading to better performance at the second time point. These external factors could have complicated the interpretation of purely age-related changes. Another important factor they discussed is the participant attrition again, because the people who stayed in the study tended to be a bit healthier and more educated to begin with. They might not have shown the same declines as a more general population of older adults. This highlights a common challenge in aging research. The study also suggested that individual differences are huge. Not everyone ages the same way. And factors like lifestyle, social support, and even mental health can play a big role. Future research could delve into these individual trajectories and protective factors. So, what does this all mean? This study makes a strong case for the idea that cognitive control is not a single unified ability. Different aspects of cognitive control might change differently with age, and crucially differently over time. While interference control showed signs of decline, other areas like response inhibition and some aspects of proactive control remain stable or even improved due to practice. The limited longitudinal decline suggests that practice effects and individual differences are powerful forces that need to be carefully considered when studying cognitive aging. Looking ahead, the researchers suggest that longer follow-up periods and a deeper dive into individual factors like lifestyle and social support are needed. This could help us understand the complex journey of cognitive aging and potentially identify ways to support cognitive health throughout life. It's a reminder that understanding the aging mind is an ongoing exploration, and each study adds another piece to the puzzle. That's it for today's exploration on RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this interesting, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more breakdowns of fascinating science. See you next time.